Hey, happy Friday, everybody. It's Chamber Check-in time. And today I have the pleasure of showing off our Planning and Development Services Director. He's been here with us for just less than a year. It's Tim Keene. Hi, Tim.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's
It's
been,
all my
I got
pleasure.
here in March of this year. So
You
this
got
is
here in
my
March.
first winter. hmm
Okay. Well, at least you didn't come in 2017 when we had the Snowmageddon.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to a Northwest winter. No question.
Oh, we have all four seasons. That is for sure. So, Tim, these chamber check ins have been a great way to help share our members' stories, members of the chamber, and the people, their products and services. And this is a really fun conversation because this is something that, I don't know a lot about. What's the city doing for planning and development in our community? And this program started about 2.5 years ago, Tim, during the pandemic. And one of our missions of the chamber is to engage with our members, and this was one way that we could do it during this pandemic over the last couple of years. And so we've just continued on. It's been super popular. So I'm looking forward to talking with you
Yeah,
today and
this is great. hmm
help sharing the what City of Boise's doing. But first, I got to thank our series sponsor. It's Delta Dental of Idaho. And Tim, as you know, Delta Dental provides best in class dental insurance benefits, and they've been doing it for over half a century. And with that, I'm going to share a fun factoid from their Tooth Truth series. Here we go.
Hey, did you know that the Statue of Liberty's mouth is 3 feet wide? That's a serious set of chompers.
Tim, I've never been to the Statue of Liberty, but when I go there, I can't wait. It'll
hmm
be really cool. Anyway, Tim, so let me introduce you a little bit. So you've been in architecture and community planning for a long, long time.
Well, now
And
hold on a minute. Be careful there.
well, not that long, not that
Yeah.
long. You've got way more hair than I do.
Yeah.
So, Knight Fellow in Community Building at the University of Miami.
hmm
You got a Master of Science in Architecture at University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And you spent the last 6 years and 9 months in Atlanta, Georgia, right? And their planning and development
hmm
services department. What brought you to Boise, Tim?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Paul. Thanks for the question. My career has been one where I've been a planning director since the mid 90s, starting in a small town, Davidson, North Carolina, which is a beautiful small town, college town. And I was their first planner. They were concerned about growth and growth negatively affecting that small town. I moved from there to a small city, Charleston, South Carolina, which is very historic. You could argue the most historic city in this country. It has the oldest historic district in America, 1931.
Wow.
It's on the coast. It's about the same size as Boise, the city of Charleston and its region. And I moved to Atlanta when my mayor in Charleston retired in 2015. Kasim Reed hired me in Atlanta. I was the commissioner of city planning there for, as you said, nearly 7 years. And I went to Atlanta really because Atlanta is one of those cities in America that's probably in the top 5 cities in terms of poor planning. And so my interest in going there was to try to kind of repair the damage that had been done over decades as it relates to that city and worked for 3 mayors technically. And I came to Boise really because of the things that you know about Boise, that it's a distinctive place, that the people here care so much about this place and how it's changing and growing, and it's got so much opportunity related to avoiding the mistakes of other cities in this process of growth. Boise's in such a formative period, and there's such a chance here to do things in a distinguished way relative to American cities. That really interested me in coming here. So I visited for the first time in January of this year and met with the mayor, talked with the Mayor McLean about what she was working on and what she was looking for and help when it comes to this. And it seemed like a really good fit. So So I came here because of the opportunity here around growth and development and shaping the city such that people can use growth as a path to a better city.
I love it. You know, that's the story, right? You hit the nail on the head. People in this community care a lot about their community, and that is so true and apparent in everything you see around here. So, share with me a little bit about your department. What is its role, and what is it exactly that you do, that you and your team do?
Yeah. Well, the planning department for the city of Boise and most planning departments really are engaged in everything around having to do with the physical development of the city. So anything related to growth and development. So in the case of planning and development services for the city of Boise, the way we're organized is we've got several offices. And the good news is we've got great leadership within each of these offices. So we have planning, which has to do with zoning and design and of buildings and design of places. Planning includes actually transportation related people that are looking at streets and how we get around the city, which I'll talk more about. So we have a planning group led by Jessica Zelag. Then we have a group that is really concentrating on housing and community development led by Maureen Brewer, and is the city's team that's working on furthering housing affordability in the city. And then the third group we've got in terms of kind of operations is our buildings department, which is involved in all of the permitting of new construction and renovations, just permitting of things in general in the city. So I say that we're involved in the physical development of the city. And by the way, buildings is led by Jason Blaze, who's led that team for a long time, and it's just a phenomenal public servant. And I say we're involved in the physical development because when you think about it, we are involved in the day-to-day things. Like if you're doing a renovation to your house or you're building a big building of any kind, we're here to help and facilitate that. So the day-to-day activity of building the city, but we're also looking at the city 5, 10, 20 years from now. You know, how are we, the planning department uniquely in any city is the one department that's really responsible for the whole, not just the parts. You know, it's not just about individual projects. We are here to seek to ensure that the city that results as a whole is one that is a better place to live and is addressing those big issues that the community is so concerned about.
That's a great spotlight. So planning, housing, and building.
Right.
That's kind of the three pillars, and then obviously the operations and administration that all that takes, I would imagine.
That's right.
So we're at a critical time in Boise's history with this unprecedented growth, this unprecedented time, all the accolades that Boise receives throughout the nation. What are some of the things that when you came on board did you experience? And then maybe what's some of your priorities after being in your seat for 9 months?
Well, I think, you know, the several things about this. One is that clearly, you know, there are concerns about growth and change in the city, and those are legitimate, and we have to help people navigate change and these things. But to be clear, if we're good at it and we're very intentional about what we do, us representing the community through the planning department, it is clearly the case that the growth that we're seeing can be helpful. The growth that the city's experiencing, if we're intentional about it again and we direct it in the right ways, can help us solve our biggest problems. So that number one is goal number one for the planning department at the city of Boise, is to put us in a position as a community to be leading on growth and development such that the city's getting better and better as it gets bigger. And so that's number one. A subset of that is, what are the big issues that cities are facing? that we need to be addressing. And I'll say three things. One is housing affordability. Clearly, these are issues that cities have a very hard time with, but we've got to get really good at here in Boise. So one is housing affordability. The second I'll mention is transportation, mobility, how people get around. And it's helpful for me, and I think people look askance a bit when you talk about coming from Atlanta, Georgia, but I can tell you that that's a city and region that experienced these same things decades ago.
Right.
And so there is a benefit from having experienced a very kind of somewhat delicate place like Charleston to working in a place that's not as delicate, that really developed decades ago. There's helpful aspects of that. And so I think this issue around housing affordability, transportation, mobility, and the third one I'll mention is just kind of environmental. It relates to how do we protect the unique natural characteristics of this place that we all share, and in growing, address things like housing affordability and transportation, and which has to do with how we're growing. But then in the meantime, ensuring that nature thrives in the process as well. That combination of things. It's almost like the urban part of it, affordability, mobility, but also the natural part of it, and these things are not in conflict with one another. They're part of the same thing. So I'll mention that first, Paul, and then just real quick, I want to mention, because we're involved in people's lives in so many ways because of our permitting systems, we're also looking at how do we do this job as well as we can, so that, to be clear, out of these permitting processes that we administer, that so many people that live in the city experience, we want to ensure that what we're doing results in higher quality construction and design in the city. Clearly, that is a commitment. But at the same time, we want these things to be services that people experience, and they're consistent and predictable. Like that, in getting permits for things, you're renovating your kitchen or you're building a 15-story building, it is a process that makes sense and you can count on. So one other thing we're doing, which isn't related to growth and things as much, as this is more nitty gritty, but it's very important for people, is to really critique the way we do our permitting, such that we're careful that we're doing it super well. So yeah, we're getting better quality out of it, but we're treating people the way they would want to be treated, with empathy and helpfulness and all that kind of stuff. And the good news is, and we were talking about this before we went on, Paul, is that we've got a tremendous number of very qualified, dedicated people that work in this planning department for the city. I am super impressed by the genuine commitment that people working here have. Like, as it relates to permitting specifically, you've got people that have been following processes for a long time that are completely open to the idea of changing them such that they can be better. That's a great situation. I mean, this, any organization, if you're responsible for administering processes, think of all the ways that we as people experience organizations and how they treat people. And you have a group of people here in the planning department that is really open to change and improving. So it's a very good situation.
That's incredible. That's so on par, because it takes the people to get the stuff done. And if they're open to change, which that's the new constant is change, that's huge. So I know you mentioned some of the directors of each of the pillars of the planning and development services. Is there anybody else on your team that you wanted to just recognize while we have you?
Well, I mentioned Maureen and Jason and Jessica. They lead those three groups that are really involved in the things that people experience. Yvette Harris here, who is really, you mentioned the kind of day-to-day operational aspects of what we do. Yvette leads that group. And there's so many other people here that are leading, and that be careful to,
Right.
go too deep into individuals, because there are so many that we have people here that really enjoy serving people, and you have some really talented people that are responsible for things here that people care so much about.
Okay. So what's coming up? What's new? I know there's some events that obviously your team relies on feedback from the community. And tell us about these opportunities where the community
Yeah.
can give you their feedback.
I'll set it up for a second, Paul. This relates to the city is rewriting its zoning ordinance. So it's rewriting its rules around development in the city. And to give you some context on how unique an experience this is, the rules that we have today were originally enacted in 1966. So that is a time, obviously, that was very different in this city and in this country when it comes to how cities were growing, what expectations were with regard to how we would want to shape growth in the 1960s, 70s, 80s. So here we are so many decades later, and we're going back and rewriting those rules. So it's a unique opportunity for people to engage. And this process has been going on for a few years now for the city, which isn't unusual. Anytime a city rewrites its rules about development, it takes time. But here we are, we're getting towards the end of the process because we've laid out what those rules would be. The purpose is to create a set of rules that give us that seek to give us the kind of development that is helpful, in terms of addressing housing affordability, mobility, protecting the environment. We want rules that do those things, and so we've been working on creating those rules. Now we're in the last part of the process, which is a very important one related to what are our approval processes that we will use to enable that development. So, anytime you build something, there's some kind of process associated with it. People are familiar with zoning cases going to the Planning and Zoning Commission and on to City Council. That's an example. We have a design review committee that reviews design of buildings and things like this. So we've got these different processes. So what we're discussing right now is how do we align our process with the city we want to build? And so that's the public discussion right now. It's a very important one. I say this at each of these meetings. So if you've been to one of these meetings, you've heard me say this. The purpose of this last phase is not to figure out that what we should aspire to is not to figure out how to argue with each other. That's not what this third phase is really about. Decades after this past ordinance was created, we have to move beyond figuring out how we're going to argue with each other and rather figure out how do we create a process that makes the things we want easy to do. Not easy in the sense that, hey, just build anything anywhere. Not at all. We've been very particular about these rules and configured a process that we think will result in higher quality. But then how do we make that easy, through the process? And so that's why this public discussion right now that you mentioned, Paul, is so important. And we've had 3 meetings, public meetings. We had one last night, as a matter of fact. We've got 2 more coming up. One is a online meeting next week, and then we'll have another one the following week, which is in person at the Ada County Library. So we've got a couple more chances for people to participate in this discussion. It's a very important one, and each of these meetings has been highly productive with lots of opinions, as you would understand. Our goal, Paul, is to finish this round of public meetings and then prepare an ordinance that would be presented for official adoption early next year. So we'll get into, having gone through this process and involved so many people, we'll then be able to move on to getting the ordinance adopted early next year.
So new rules with new expectations, I think, is aligning well, right? And I think that's the goal. You mentioned there's a November 8th from noon to 1, and that's a Zoom call. And that's right. next Tuesday. And I think you can go to the cityofboise.org website, and I've got that up on the screen now. And you can scroll to the departments and find the Planning and Development Services link in there, and you can find these dates. And probably, I would imagine, the Zoom links as well. And then also November 16th from 6 to 7:30 at, you mentioned, some Ada County libraries, Victory Branch and et cetera, and the one downtown Boise. Is there anything else that you'd like to share while I have you for a few more minutes, Tim?
Well, I'll mention one other thing that we're doing here. We recognize that for the city to be successful, and as we grow, one of the lessons from other cities is that when it comes to transportation, the only really helpful solution is that as we grow, people have to drive less. Again, this is a lesson from every other city in America, that the only way to seek to address transportation issues is to grow such that more and more people can drive less. So not that people won't drive, of course they will. Everybody will. But if it could be that the average number of car trips generated by any individual household goes from what it is today, 10, if it goes down to 8, 6, now we're getting somewhere. And so, but the only reason we can be successful with that is if the experience of not driving, if the experience of walking or riding your bike or using transit is a pleasant, affordable, enjoyable one. And so we really, really have to concentrate on this issue in the city. And as you know, Paul, we've got partners that in this case, in Boise's case, are especially important, like the Ada County Highway District and of course the State Highway Department. But we are creating in the planning department, we're kind of beefing up our team that works on transportation, and we're creating a team called Mobility and Public Spaces. We've got a director coming in for that group in December. We're very excited about this, giving us much more capacity to work on things like the pathways plan that the city has and execute on that. But in many other ways, addressing issues across the city, the entire city, no matter where you live, concentrating on ensuring that more and more people have the reason we have other ways to get around, and the reason we call it mobility in public spaces is because we do know that a big part of people's choice to not drive and take other modes is the quality of the public spaces and the public realm that we share. That's the difference between success and failure. So I wanted to mention that, Paul, because this is going to be a big emphasis of ours, and there's been so much work in Boise already around preparing for this and making the city more walkable and bikeable and those kinds of things, and making transit better. But we're really concentrating on improving our team and capacity to help people in this community address this issue.
You can see it. There's so many examples of it, Tim, like with the Fowler Building connecting to Julie Davis Park, like the new 11th and Main building there with the city park, mm-hmm. and the new 11th Street that's being really built to provide those more different modes of transport, and that right. whole system right there from Camel's Back Park all the way to the river yeah. and through it. And so many examples of that.
Yeah. And, and as it relates to kind of emerging issues around this, you talk about the State Street corridor and the amazing opportunity there. And it's going to be, an evolution there on State Street, but there's a real concentration on State Street and other places like Vista, on the Bench, Fairview. Really, every corner of the city, there's issues related to this, and so we've just got to get really, really good at it.
Well, I've been a bicycle commuter in this town from the early 90s, and it's gotten so much better. The bike paths, it's so much safer to ride now. And I'm so excited about this new Pathways partnership to kind of come to fruition. And as you mentioned, take the time it takes. So Tim, thank you so much for educating me a little bit more about your department, the people on your team, and the exciting future that we have to look forward to.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Paul. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk, especially to your membership, which we're in such partnership with all the institutions and business community here, and we share, we all share the same, the same aspirations. We just have to come to better solutions around some of these tough issues.
Absolutely. Tim, have a great weekend with your family here, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul.
You bet. Bye.